Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Usagi Podjimbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike. As always, we are wrapping up this particular storyline we are looking at today. We're looking at Runaways Part 2. If you don't remember what happened in the last issue, Usagi went into a town and he had a flashback because he remembered somebody's name, Lady Hirano. He remembers a Lady Hirano way back in the day. And he remembers, he goes into like a little flashback sequence, and he actually gets put on bodyguard duty for the princess, and it's basically she's going into a marriage, which is to strengthen the bond between these two clans and make them more powerful and stuff like that. And that's basically the whole story, kind of like a nutshell. And they kind of sort of have a spark and sort of might be falling in love, in the first issue. But, Neko ninjas basically attack and mess things up. And, we go from there as Usagi and the princess is basically running for their lives. And that's where we pick up is Usagi gets basically back into his daydreaming status as we see where we left off from the last issue, make way for Lady Hirano. So Lady Hirano and her minions or men are coming through this village that Usagi went to before, and he remembers. He starts to remember more about that story. He remembers Kyoko and her talking to Usagi. They're walking through the forest. They just got away from the Neko ninjas to begin with. And, she talks about, I hated you, Usagi, because you were delivering me into a loveless marriage. And, Usagi's like, but you'll be a consort of Lord Hirano, one of Lord Mifune's most powerful allies. Because that's why Usagi was in this to begin with. Was, he was helping out a fellow lords, because, Usagi is Lord Mifune's retainer, and to help strengthen the bond between the lords, Usagi's stepping in to help out and whatnot. As they're walking along, they come across a little, I think it's like a little shrine, or possibly shelter, I want to say. I'm not really sure what it is, but the Princess Kyoko, I'm probably going to butcher her name, to be honest, a lot. Kinyuko is what her name is. Kinyuko. She starts talking about how, she's in this arranged marriage. She's basically just being used as a tool to benefit the clans and whatnot. And she starts talking about how, all my life, and my father's castle, I've been pampered and, basically told what to do. You're not really allowed to basically make my own decisions and stuff like that, Everything from my food being chosen, my wardrobe, my daily tasks, stuff like that, She's like, they come across this building, and they walk up to it, and they start to look around to survey the scenery. And she continues to talk, and she's like, I am a princess, but still my life is controlled by my lowest servant, I can't expect my life with Lord Hirano to be any different now, can I? And Usagi is gathering water for the both of them at this point, and he says, but I have heard Lord Hirano is a fine person. And we get this whole conversation between Kyuko and Usagi about Lord Hirano. And she starts to talk about how, I've never met him before, and basically this is just purely political union, I don't think he's ever really going to love me, she's like, I was to be wed out of duty, not love. And she starts talking about how, everything I have done in my life has been done out of my obligation to the Takana clan. And I am just a pawn in my clan's politics, which she is actually right about this, I feel like. I don't know much about arranged marriages back in the day. I know sometimes they still happen, But it's interesting to see I don't know, to view it from like my point of view, personally, I don't understand arranged marriages, but yet she feels very much duty bound, almost like Usagi feels like he's honor bound and duty bound to complete his task as a samurai. She feels, I'm guessing, she feels like she is very much uh, honor bound, as well as her duty to basically strengthen the clans and marry this person that she's never met before. Which, for me, honestly, I feel like that's really, really crazy to say, like somebody would go about doing that. But I mean, people nowadays get married and they only know each other for like a week. So I guess it's kind of the same thing, maybe. Who knows? Kinuko takes a sip of her water. She looks very sad, and she ends up thanking Usagi for the water. And she asks Usagi, "Do you have a love, Usagi?" And Usagi kind of is taken back, and he's like, "There was someone. Her name was Mariko, and in my home village, Mariko was in his own village, and but she actually recently got wed to someone else." And Kinoko is like, "I am destined for a loveless marriage, and your love has married another." And she's like, we are the opposite side of the same coin, Usagi." And they kind of start to walk off, and they actually later on, they actually do get to a village. Finally, they get to a village, and they start to blend in more with their surroundings. And Kinoko is like, there's are certainly a lot of people around in this town, aren't there? And Usagi's like, yeah, it's better for us to get lost in the crowd, and be too conspicuous traveling alone and whatnot. And then they actually meet the woodcutters who they actually stole from in the previous issue. And they start to strike up a conversation with the woodcutters. Usagi asks one of the woodcutters, he's like, "Hey, where are you going?" And the woodcutter's like, "Oh, what? Don't you know it's time for I'm probably going to butcher this name, Tanabata Matsuri, which is the festival of the Waver Star." And Kinoko is like, "Oh, I've heard of that celebration." And the woodcutter's like, "Oh, of course. You know how the story goes, that there were two-star lovers actually named Shinokugo and Kinigayu." I think I just butchered that. Which translate to Vega and Altair. But they were basically separated by the heavens. However, they are actually able to meet one night out of the year on the 7th day of the 7th month, when the Kasagai birds or magpies stretch out their wings and form a bridge for them to cross. The woodcutters continue to talk, and one of them says, "Shokugo is also known as the Waver Star, and so this is not only a festival for lovers, but for the arts of weaving and sewing. Isn't that right, husband?" And he's like, "Oh, of course, yeah, you're absolutely right as well." And the two woodcutters just walk off, leaving Usagi and the princess behind. Like they're having their own conversation. They forgot Usagi was actually there. And so Usagi and his traveling companion for this issue, or I should say issue or two, they end up getting to the village, and they're so amazed by what is actually going on. People are eating, enjoying life, enjoying this festival. It looks like some of them are eating corn dogs on a stick, but I know it's probably not corn dogs. But they're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe what's going on." This is a very fun little picture. And Kinoko is like, "Oh, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten since last night." And Usagi sees one of the street vendors. And he's like, "Oh, there's a street vendor. Hey, Takoyaki man, He's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And later, you see them eating some takoyaki and stuff like that. And they're like, "Oh, this is so delicious." I love this scene Usagi's trying to eat the takoyaki, and he's like, oh, it's hot, it's so hot, like like a little child, like, oh, I thought it wasn't gonna be hot, but oh, it's actually hot, 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 hot. Usagi and Kinuko end up actually playing a bunch of like carnival games. One lady is around with a bow and arrow. She's like, "Oh, archery! Hit the bullseye! Win a prize!" And Kinuko's like, "Oh yeah, let's do it, Usagi. Let's do it." I go, "Oh yeah, if you want, Kinuko, yeah, let's do it." Usagi gets ready, draws his bow, shoots it. He doesn't make the bullseye, and he kind of wonders, "Hey, like, what's going on? This shaft must be warped, obviously." And Kinoko is like, "Oh, let me do it." She hits it, and she gets a bullseye. And she gets one of these little cool, like, if you don't remember, I remember them as a kid, but they're like a little stick and had like the propeller on top of it, and you like spin it in your hand and make it fly up in the air. She gets one of those, and she's like, "Oh, look, Usagi, we got this cool thing. Like, it's called a taktambo, which is bamboo dragonfly." And he's like, she puts it in her hands and twirls it around, and it flies up in the air, and it's really cool. And she actually gives one to the neighboring kids, and they have fun. And Usagi and Kyoko get wrapped up with these two men. They're like, "Oh, hey, you guys need to come with us, come dance with us and whatnot." Originally, before I turned the page and read the rest of the story, I thought those two guys were like bad guys. But no, they're not. Stan Sakai definitely pulled the wool over my eyes. But these two guys are like, "Oh yeah, come on, dance with us. Yeah, we're gonna have fun, And Kinuko's like, "Oh, Usagi," and Usagi's like, "No, it's okay. Just go with it. Let's have fun." And they dance and have fun, and they're just dancing to the music and whatnot. And she's like, "Oh, this is exhilarating. I can't believe I'm having so much fun. I've never had so much fun." And they're like, "Oh man, it's been such a really fun day. Let's find some place to sit. It's been a little hectic, And these two women walk by, and they're like, "Oh, what a beautiful couple they are. They truly are. They're made for each other." And Usagi and Kyoko basically kind of like blush and whatnot, and they're like, "Oh yeah, thanks," And they kind of laugh, and they're just laughing and walking around. And we see somebody who has been following them for the past couple pages. They continue on the festival, going down the festival streets and whatnot, and they're just enjoying everything. They end up meeting a woman who actually gives them a if they want to. She asks them if they want to buy a tanazaku, which is like a strip of paper, and you like compose like a love poem on it. And you tie it to the end of a branch on a tree, and you end up like, I guess supposedly whoever you do it with, I think, if I remember correctly, you are in love forever or something like that, or you have like really good luck. I can't honestly remember exactly what it is, but they get one for free, and they end up tying one up to the tree and whatnot, and they leave later on, talking about the celebrations and whatnot. And after they start talking about the celebrations and stuff, they tend to go back to the whole, Kinuko says, "I was raised I was raised pampered in a castle, while you grew up in a country village." And she starts to get really sad thinking about it and whatnot. And she's like, Sagi says, "But you were here together on the same night, yes?" And she's like, she kind of snaps out of her sadness. She's like, "Oh, look, chrysanthemums." She's like, "These are my favorite flowers." And she goes up to like sniff them, and Usagi ends up giving her one. And she's like, "Oh, these are blooming earlier than usual." And she's like, "Oh, these are my favorite. This." And she's like, "This is for you, Usagi. Whenever you see a Kikyu, which is a chrysanthemum, think of me." And she ends up giving one to him. Sorry, I got that reversed. I said he gave one to her, but she actually gives one to him, which is really nice and touching. They get close, and you think they're gonna have a moment and maybe kiss, but they don't. They actually hug, and Usagi like steps back. And he's like, "No," and he pushes her back, and he's like, "She's like, what, Usagi? What is it? You know?" And he's like, "Forgive me, princess. For a while, I forgot who you actually really were. You know, but we did have a moment." He kind of looks sad. He's like, "We best be going. I've been so happy with you today," she says. And Usagi just continues to walk off. And she's like, "When you deliver me to Lord Hirano, will you just go back to your old life? Will you, Usagi? Please answer me, And she's like, "Let's run away together. Let's run away. Everything will be okay. Everybody thinks we're dead anyways because the Neko ninjas, the people think they assassinated us." And she's like, "Usagi, talk to me." And she's like, she gets on him. She hugs him from behind. She's like, we can be truly happy together, and no one need ever find us." And you hear off in the distance, "Oh, how touching." Usagi says, "Oh, who are you?" And we see a familiar face who we haven't seen in quite some time, but technically Usagi is seeing them for the very first time. We are meeting for the first time. Technically the second time, but it's the first time. We are meeting Shinji, who is an executive officer of the Neko Ninja clan. Now, if you remember who Shinji is, he was basically like the leader of the Neko Ninjas before he tragically passed away, which I'm still sad about that Shinji is not around. But I love seeing Shinji show up in this different light that we know Shinji of, which is really cool to see. I love this little touch in the story. But the Neko Ninjas actually surround them, and Kyoko is like, "Oh, Usagi, they're behind us." And Usagi says he was trying to distract us so his comrades could sneak up on us. Obviously, Usagi, that's what he was doing, right? And we get this really, really cool fight scene where one of the Neko Ninjas jumps up in the air and comes down on Usagi. Usagi takes him out. He's taking on 5 Neko Ninjas at once. A very, very valiant fight. And the Neko Ninjas start throwing ninja stars at Usagi. He tries to deflect them, but one of them actually hits his shoulder. And Usagi is surrounded by these ninjas, and one of them ends up throwing out like a kunai like chain, wrapping it around. I think a couple of them do, but I've only pictured one here. I think it's a couple of them. They throw out one, wrapping it around Usagi's hand, his foot, and his neck. So Usagi is trapped, and the Neko Ninjas go to jump after him, and Usagi basically pulls on the chains, cutting them. And I love this scene. I feel like you never bring a chain to a sword fight. Just saying. Where Usagi takes one of his swords, his free sword that he has, and he actually throws it at one of the ninjas, and it goes right through the guy's throat, and he just takes them all out in succession. Like, just seeing that happen is so cool. And then one of the Neko Ninjas actually pulls Usagi. Usagi falls on his back, it looks like, and then he ends up being able to stab one of the last Neko Ninjas in the chest. And Usagi is backed up into a corner, backed up against a tree with the princess. And he's like, "Come on, I know I can't stop all of you, but we'll sell our lives dearly." That's what he says. And Shinji says, "Brave words. We'll meet again someday, samurai." And they just take off and run away. And Usagi's shocked that they just ran away. And the princess is like, "Hey, Usagi, look who happens to show up. Gunichi and all the other men who are working with Gunichi." And he's like, "Oh, Usagi, it looks like we got here just in time. But it's good to see you actually are holding up well, I just thought this was, a simple babysitting job. But apparently, it wasn't just a simple babysitting job." And he's like, oh, we got to get you to the Lord Hirano princess, and you're to be wed and whatnot. And she's like, yeah, I gotta go. And obviously something has happened between Usagi and the princess, and I think Gunichi is starting to pick up on it, which I don't really know how Usagi can fall in love with somebody within the span of like a few days, but I mean, I guess it can happen. Much later at the Hirano castle, we see Usagi and Gunichi walking through the castle, and Gunichi says that Lord Hirano actually wants to thank Usagi for his service and what he actually did. And Gunichi says, a word of friendship, Usagi. Don't do or say anything stupid. And Usagi's like, I don't know what you exactly mean. And Gunichi's like, I think you know what I actually mean. And Usagi tells Gunichi to actually mind his own business. This is where we get to meet Lord Hirano. And he is sitting down with his princess. And he's like, I commend you. I commend our Lord Mifune on the dedication of his vessel. He's like, I give you my thanks, samurai, for safely escorting the princess to our clan. And they're like, oh, thank you, and Usagi says, thank you. He's like, because of you, the ties binding the Takani clan and the Hirano clan has strengthened, and you will receive a reward, samurai. But is there any personal boon you wish to ask of me? And surprisingly, Usagi says, yes, Lord Hirano. I would ask a few minutes alone with Princess Kinuko. And Gunichi's like, you idiot, why would you do that? And he's like, what? A bold request, samurai. But granted, if the lady so desires it. And she actually says, yes, my lord, it would please me to add my personal words of thanks to my rescuer. And that's what we move on to. Kinuko ends up saying that, because they're out in the garden right now, they're on the yards of the castle, and she ends up saying, I'm very glad your wounds weren't too serious, come walk with me in the garden, samurai, it's just a beautiful day. And Usagi goes to address her as her actual name, but, she stops him, and she's like, no, you must, I must ask you to not refer to me with such a formal name, samurai. Or, not formal name, for a name which is like formality, basically. So he's like, what are you talking about? And Usagi goes to say, but you were right. We do deserve our happiness. I will appeal your marriage to Lord Mifune myself. And she's like, no, you're not going to appeal because you'll basically get denied and whatnot. And Usagi's like, no, but you don't love Lord Hirano. And she's like, no, but I have a loyalty to my clan. I forgot my my obligation for a few days, but I am back again now. And Usagi's shocked. And he's like, what about us? And Kinuko is like, there can be no us. There is only a lady of nobility and a low-born samurai. Anything more would result in the death of one of us, which is so sad to hear. And Kyoko is like, our class structure separates us, just as the I'm going to butcher this name, Amanagawa separates the two stars Shugokujo and Kinjuyu. Ugh. Sorry for the butcher. I'm a white guy from Texas. And Usagi holds out his hand. He's like, I don't accept that. Take my hand, Kyoko, and leave with me. And he has his hand extended, and she goes to reach for it, but she pulls away and she stops. She's like, forgive me, Usagi. Shukujo had the strength to cross the bridge, but I do not. We had our night, our one night, Usagi. We must distance ourselves again. And she gives him a flower, gives him a chrysanthemum, and she's like, I will always remember our time together. But now all I can offer you is this flower to remember me by. Now, farewell, samurai. My lord Hirano awaits me, and though you ask for a private audience, I am sure we are being watched. And the flashback ends with Usagi holding his head down and holding the flower. And we go back to present day, and he wonders, she was far wiser than I was. And he sees her I don't know, it's not like a stagecoach. I don't know what it is, like I don't know what you would exactly call it. Carriage, I guess you would call it. Carriage carried by people. He looks at it and he bows down and he looks up at it, like directly at the window, and he thinks to himself, he's like, sigh. I doubt she even remembered that a young samurai from long ago. And he's like, well, I still have a long road to travel. And he walks off, and we see the window open, and a chrysanthemum falls out behind Usagi as he walks away. And that is where this issue ends. Man, this issue was good for a two-parter ending, man. I have to say, it wraps up everything really, really nicely. I'm very sad Usagi does not get the girl. But one thing, I did point this out in the last issue. I like how we're getting all these interconnecting stories with Usagi and his past and whatnot. And we get to see more of Usagi's past. But we get to see characters that Usagi has already come into contact with and interacted with. But now we get to see them interacting in a whole different scenario, which is mind-blowing. I never thought we would ever see Shinji again. And seeing Shinji, an up-and-coming, member in, the Neko Ninja clan is really cool to see. And, see how, even back then, the Neko Ninjas had their hands in a lot of different pies, as one might say, which is really cool. I'm just blown away that we got to see Shinji again, because Shinji was one of my favorite characters before he died. He was such a cool character. He made such a cool, big impact in the story, and his impact is still being felt, I would say, to this day. But I liked getting this younger Usagi story, and it's a story very much of unrequited love, very Romeo and Juliet-esque. And I really, really liked it. I still can't wrap my head around how they can fall in love with each other that fast. But hey, it is what it is. It's a story. It's a work of fiction. I really, really liked this two-parter. It's a lot of fun, and it very much surprised me in every sense. I love the fighting and stuff like that. The fighting was so well done. It was so very well, dynamic. It was dynamic fighting in this one. I love seeing Usagi, think on his feet, trying to get away from the ninjas and whatnot, and, how he, used his wits and his training to get out of, the situation he was in. I never thought he would throw his sword at somebody and it would get stuck in somebody's neck. That was insane and very violent, and I love it. I love it all the same, But yeah, this is a really good one. We are almost done with the Mirage story. This is Mirage stories. We have 2 more, I believe, and then we're going to be done, and we're moving on to the Dark Horse run, which is so exciting to get to, I can't wait. We'll see how I'm going to have to cover that, because there's some parts where I'm like, ooh, that looks a little tricky on how I'm going to have to cover it, but we'll see especially with Grass Cutter. Grass Cutter is going to be really interesting to cover when we get to Grass Cutter. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. If you want to leave me feedback, you can do so on Spotify. We have a comment section, or you can leave feedback and reviews on Apple Podcast, stuff like that. Sadly, in April, we will no longer have Google Podcast as on our podcast platforms to choose from. Google Podcast is going away, and everything will be going over from Google Podcast, going over to YouTube Music. So if you want to go listen over there, you totally can. I've moved everything over there, and all the new stuff is going to be uploaded there as well as the other podcast platforms that Usagi Podjimbo is actually going to be on. So no worries, really. If anybody listens on Google Podcasts, just move over to another podcast provider, and you can still continue to listen to the show. Just want to say thank you to everybody who listens to the show. It really, really means a lot. Sorry for my mispronunciation of any Japanese name. It's my fault. I'm a white guy from the South. I apologize. But, I mean, it is what it is, But thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular episode, and I'll catch you guys on the next podcast. Stay safe out there and go read some Usagi Yojimbo. Take care.